Welcome back to We Should Be Working. I'm Zach Hendricks. With me, as always, is Jeff Finley. It's good to be back. Good to be chatting with you all, and Jeff, especially good to be back chatting with you. I know that we've got a lot of updates, but just curious how your week is and how you're doing.
Oh, I'm doing good. Yeah, I spent the week off. We took the week off last week, and I went up and visited my family for the big old solar eclipse. So, it's good to be back in the saddle, doing this podcast again, talking with you. How was your
Who,
week?
when you went and visited family, whose family? Brothers, cousins, mom,
Oh,
dad? Who
I
you
went and
visiting?
visited my immediate family with at my brother's house, and so it's just me, my brother, my sister, just the immediate family.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spent watching the eclipse. It's kind of interesting. My son's school, for whatever reason, like they won't let them outside to go see the eclipse. So you
Hmm.
go by and there was a bunch of parents there that had the same idea as I had. I'm like, well, I'm just going to go sign him out of school. So ran in there, signed him out of school. We walked outside the school, put our glasses on, and got a nice little look. And I was like, all right, go back to school. And yeah, so stupid things that schools do at times.
Yeah, nice. We happen to be in the path of totality, where we live, so it was cool. Never got to see that before.
Yeah, so jealous of that. So how dark did it actually get? Was it just kind of like, did it feel just kind of like dusky, like the sun's about to go down, or was it like it was pretty dark?
It got pretty dark, maybe about, not totally night, but definitely dark enough where you felt it was cold and it felt like you could hear the birds all get quiet. They started chirping before it went full dark, and then when it started to get lighter, the birds woke up again and they started chirping like crazy. They were going buck wild.
Oh, that's crazy. That's really cool. Yeah, I've always wanted to be in a spot where it's 100%, but never ever have. So jealous there. So work-wise, what's new with you these days?
Well, let's see. The biggest update is I got all 12 of my Box of Milk albums posted live. They're on Spotify and Bandcamp, and everything is done. So I'm like super accomplished, feeling, that was a big project of mine. Finally got that out there. So, and then now I can focus on, I've got two songs I want to finish that are in the process of production that I want to work on. So get back to doing that. And then also updating my website, because the reason why I'm uploading all of this stuff to Bandcamp and to Spotify and all that is to have a digital archive, which I want that to carry over to my website. And so I have a real organized place for all of my creations. And it's just kind of hard to believe that all of these old music albums that I made from the year 2000 to 2010, basically, I just never posted online anywhere. So it's like, it's just good to have them up there. I can't believe it's been 24 years and I'm finally posting them, but yeah, it's good. Um, so there's that, and then I got another freelance scam that I can tell you about in a minute. But
So, I wanted to ask you on the music as well. I was kind of curious because I know some of that music is older, and I'm always curious about this. I was even talking with my wife about this weekend that music is a really interesting creative art. In the fact that, don't get me wrong, artists go out, they record new music and all of that, but the majority of the time they're repeating the old things that they did all the time. And that's usually their career. You're on tour, you're playing your old songs day in and day out. I'm sure you might add one or two in there, but pretty much no other creative medium are you repeating that same thing as much as you do in music. But it doesn't really bother anybody, and it doesn't seem to bother the musicians. Whereas if you're a stand-up comedian, I'm sure they would love to be able to tell the same jokes over and over and over again, but you can't. The audience is gonna lose it. And even when you're making a video or graphic design, while you're using same elements and same skills and same techniques, you're not doing the exact same design over and over and over again. So when you go back and look through your old music, what's your reaction with that? Do you have some? I imagine that you probably have some that you're like, man, that is, I look like a rookie or I look green out there, or maybe not. Maybe you're like, no, this is great. Do you look back on those with fondness or like, man, this was a killer track. I forgot how good this was. Or are you some like, I'm a little embarrassed to put this out, but I just want to put it out there so I have everything up? Or what is your reaction with that with music as a musician?
that's a good question because for me, listening to all of my old stuff, was very nostalgic, and I am kind of envious of my old self. When I listen to it, I'm like, this stuff wasn't it's not I wouldn't say it's good, like marketable for a mass audience or anything like that, but when I hear it myself, I'm just impressed with my creativity and the stuff that I'd managed to do without hardly knowing anything, and how much I was able to put out at that time. And some of the stuff, it's good to me. It's groovy to me. It was like, I love listening to my old music. I sometimes I feel more impressed with it because a lot of time back in the day, I made it and I feel judgmental of it then. But then years later, listening back at it with kind of a fresh ear, I'm like, man, I really like that. There's some good elements, good things I did. It kind of inspires me to make music again because one of the things about my old stuff that I don't deal with today was back then I was new. I didn't have any expectations. So I just like made whatever sounded good to me then. And as like we've talked about this before, as you get better as a musician, you kind of learn more about stuff that you learn more about mixing, you learn more about mastering and professionalism and sounding more like a pop hit on the charts or something.
Sure.
I started to like kind of go in this direction where I'm trying to professionalize and get better with my sound. But as a result, my sound sounds a little bit more like other people now. But when I listen to my old stuff, it's like uniquely my own, that it's like a trip down memory lane and within my own mind and being like, I think this stuff is so cool. Like, so I'm just proud of it. I don't care if anybody else listens to it. I just like listening to it. It's weird and it's quirky and it's fun and yeah.
Yeah, and that's like you said, I've always been fascinated with that, and not really being a musician myself, I've always been curious about that because there is some interesting thing where I've heard interviews with bands and they talk about it, and there was one time the person was interviewing them and they were talking about a song that was probably like 20 years old, and they were asking about the meaning of it, and the person was like, I don't even really remember what the meaning of it is. Now, I still love playing it. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite songs to go out there and play and rip, but like the words aren't even there for me. I'm in a different space and I'm kind of more gelling and vibing with the crowd. But now at this point, I don't even remember what my original intention was behind that. Like I've gotten so far away from it at that point. And that's not to say that, again, that they don't enjoy the music or don't relate to it, but it's just taken on a completely different animal at this point. And I think that's a really interesting thing with music that kind of no other really art form has, that you can repeat it over and over and over and still love it, or even love it more the time goes on. I mean, I think viewers can have that experience maybe with a movie where they're watching it over and over, but it's not a two-way street now. You're not The people making that movie and acting in it aren't doing it over and over and over and over again. But when you go to a show, that musician has been playing it over and over and over and over and over. So you listen to the CD, you go to the show, and for some reason, having that mesh between artist and crowd is very unique. That I'm always jealous of musicians.
Yeah, and you hear musicians a lot say like they get tired of playing the hits, from 20 years
Yeah.
ago, and they're like in a completely different stage of their life where they're writing completely different music that suits them at 45, rather than 20. And so
Hmm.
when they have to like continually play, they're like angsty teenage pop punk tracks for like a generation of, you know, 40 something millennials who are like trying to relive their past, and they're excited because this is like they don't hear it every day. They didn't write it, but when they hear someone playing it back, it's their chance to shout all the lyrics that they remember and kind of have that experience, that nostalgic experience. And for the artist, it's often not like that. They have to play the same dumb track every single week for their tour, and nobody cares about their new track that they're really proud of. It's like boring. Get on with that.
Yeah.
Artists have to deal with that. I guess that's just the process of aging. But you made a good point about how in movies the actors don't have to continually perform their old movie over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's not theater.
No.
Theater might be the next closest thing. But yeah,
Hmm.
you just remind me of something also when speaking of, the old tired fans and all of that. It's interesting how you do kind of age with your fan group. And sure, you'll get younger people in there. Like one of my favorite bands from the 90s was Garbage. And I've seen them tons of times, met them a bunch of times. And I remember though, I went to a show. I hadn't seen them for a little while, maybe 7 or 8 years, and I'm definitely older now. But it's in one of the bigger venues here in Colorado, the Fillmore. Yes, it's a spinoff of the famous Fillmore. But they're playing there, bigger crowd, and they're getting into their songs, and I'm like, there's no like mosh pit. There's no, nobody's like pushing people around. There's no like crazy
Hmm.
jump. It's a bunch of old people now. I was like, oh no. And it was so depressing for me because I loved going to their shows. And don't get me wrong, they're not like some big mosh pit crowd where, but it was still strong enough music with a young enough crowd that everybody's pushing each other around and you're moving and shaking and all of this. And now I'm there and everybody's just standing there like this. And I was like, oh no, this has kind of ruined the show for me. We've gotten too old that nobody wants to do that anymore. They're like, my back hurts, my knees. I just want to sit here and listen to it. And I was like, I wanted that experience still from when I was 20 years old, getting pushed around at their shows. And
Hmm.
I remember my friend came in flip flops and lost a flip flop at the show. And we're like trying to push people around and get his flip flop back because we're moving around and the crowd's like kind of taking on a life of its own. And I was like, oh no, garbage is old now. This is no good. And of course they are. These guys are like 50s, 60s, I think,
Yeah.
at this point, which is crazy. So yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of exactly the same experience that I had. Me, my dad, and my brother, we went to this like uh, Rock on the Range kind of a festival, that's like in rural Ohio, and bands like AC/DC's there, and bands of that era, but they're all like all these new substitute members because they're all too old. So it's like there's Eddie Van Halen, or these acts, Foghat, all these bands from the '70s, but they're up there and they're literally like geriatric. They're but they got like a 20-year-old on a drum kit because he's like the new upstart, but he's subbing in. But my dad made the same comment. He's like, everybody here is so old and boring, and everyone's like decrepit and old. They're sitting in their chairs. They brought their fold out chairs. They're just like with their beer,
Yeah.
sitting back, and there's no mosh pit. Everyone's like just kind of just sitting there getting drunk, and it's like a weird experience watching these old guys rock out and come on, Cleveland, Ohio, like
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice. Yeah. I
yeah, pretty
remember
much.
I was working a corporate event, and long story short, I was backstage. So the event that I was doing was a day or two later, but because of the setup, all of the graphics and stuff that we were building, the graphics and video, we were backstage. And so at these corporate events, they bring these guys on, and they had ZZ Top. And so we're sitting backstage working on our graphics, doing all of this stuff, waiting for another day. And ZZ Top is up there, and we take a break and go see ZZ Top. And that was the ultimate geriatric show of like, they looked like robots with skin on, just like going through the motions. Their whole show was so choreographed that it's down, up, down, up. Like they knew the mark to hit, and they've probably been hitting this mark for over 10 years, playing the exact same set list for like 10 years straight. And they were so old that all this just like, oh man, this is, I feel bad for these guys. But there's still fans out there like, oh, that's, yeah, Tush. And you're like, oh my God. And
Yeah.
it was fascinating to see. And have you seen Offspring at all recently? I know that
Mm.
was a big band for you back in the day, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I mean it was. I haven't followed him too much. No, I don't. I
I
don't even know
was,
what they're up to.
oh, I wanted to tell you, I was sad I didn't share this with you 'cause I wanted to see your reaction. When we went through the episode and I asked you about your favorite bands and all that, and I think you said the first album that you bought was Offspring. I
Yeah.
was trying to come back and tell you the first two albums that I bought, I still find this hilarious, that I bought on cassette. I think I was like 13 years old or something like that. Was Nirvana Nevermind and Garth Brooks Ropin' in the Wind.
Oh yeah.
I went to the record store and bought both of those. Those were my two favorite bands at the time was Nirvana and Garth Brooks. I was like, how weird and ridiculous is that for some
Hmm.
like 11-year-old kid or whatever to have those two on either end of the spectrum?
Hmm.
Really, really odd.
Yeah, I used
Uh,
to like some Garth Brooks songs back in the day.
Yeah, I liked him and Brooks and Dunn, and it. I do. I am one of those people where I pretty much like all genres of music, or I can at least appreciate it. I'm happy that I kind of do have that wide breadth. But I know back in the '90s, there was some people that you're like, I won't tell them that I like Garth Brooks, or I won't tell these people that I like the Wu-Tang Clan, and all that I like rap music, and or I won't tell them that I like punk. Fortunately,
Hmm.
those barriers have changed quite a bit, and I'm not 13 anymore trying to fit in some clique. So, I'm curious about this freelance scam that you got.
Oh, so okay, look, we Zach, we talk about our money situation, our work situation. You
Uh,
know, we're trying to put ourselves out there, and I continually get opportunities hit in my inbox, and I'm like, oh man, maybe this is gonna like get me out of my situation. You know, so I have this like feeling of hope. And this one was like, here, let me pull it up real quick. Yeah, I've got it open. He's like, what did he say? He's like, hello, are you available to work on my woodworking logo? I'm Jack Peterman by name. People call me Jackwood. My timeline should work for you. 2 to 3 weeks. Well, my budget is under $600 to $700. Could you forward me your previous work? I've used some of your work through your website. And he linked to my contact page. And then I said, I look forward to hearing back from you. Best regards. And I'm like, okay, it kind of sounds weird. Maybe this guy's English isn't his first language. But I'm like,
yeah,
I got to respond to the quote. I'm like, all right, so what, $600 to $700 for a logo. Well, I mean, I typically charge like $1,500 for a brand identity at the minimum,
sure.
depending on what else they want. The price usually goes up. But for $600 or $700, okay, maybe I'll just do something. I got an idea of what I could do for 600 or 700. So I reply and I tell him I'm not going to go read my whole reply,
Sure.
but I give him a quote, good faith, and then he writes me back. He sends me this like enormously long email, and he says, "Hello, it's good to hear from you. We can move forward with this project by asking each other the rest of the questions needed to make the logo look like what we want at the end. I have told you some stories below." And then listen to he's like, my mission statement, because I asked him about his company. I wisely invest for the long term to create value for the mutual advancement of my small business company among people around me, customers, partners, and communities. That does not make any sense at all. So as I'm reading this, I'm getting this feeling like, I think this is a scam. And I'm like, I just continue to read it. And he goes on and he starts talking about the deliverables for the logo, what format he needs it in. It's a construction business. It's kind of sounds legit, but at the same time not. And then he,
Yeah.
he tells me, he says, my payment will be done through a check. So you'll have access to your funds immediately after you deposit the check in your bank. I'm like, that's red flag again right there. Considering I
Yep.
already told him I take PayPal or Venmo, but no check. And then he says, therefore, my associate will need the following information to make your check payment: full name, full address, city, state, zip code, phone number. You know, and
Yep.
then
There you
and then
go.
the last bit, this is the icing on the cake. He says, all I need from you is total honesty and sincerity. However, I know you will be committed to the work, and I promise you will also have a good time working with me. I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon. And it's like, come on,
What's
man.
what's the email address?
It is, the email address is jackpetercarpenterwoodwork at gmail.com.
I'm surprised it's that good. That's not a bad email address for a scam.
But his name is Jack Peterman, but his
Yeah.
email is Jack Peter Carpenter Woodwork. Like
It
it's
sounds
just,
like that they stole this from Seinfeld, like Jay Peterman.
oh,
I was
maybe.
like,
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that.
yeah, there's Jay Peterman was Elaine's boss a lot of time in Seinfeld. And then they just made him Jack Peterman. I was like, this sounds like a bad, it sounds like what I would write a scammer. Like if I was writing a scammer back and I was making up a name, I would do this. Wood, JP Wood. I work
Hmm.
wood. Like this sounds like you have no clue what you're doing.
Yeah.
It sounds like somebody else wrote you this. And you're like, oh, that's how they actually talk. I'll copy and paste that and then send it back. And
Yeah. Yeah.
well, that's
So
too bad. I'm sorry to hear
I,
that.
just to confirm, I put this into ChatGPT and I was like, hey, is this a scam? And then it basically listed all the red flags. And I was like, okay, yeah, I feel pretty good about not replying to this. But I'm disappointed because this is like the second or third one I've had in the past few months where it's like, okay, there's that. But then I do get legitimate inquiries. I had an old client reach out back to me and they asked me to do some cover art for the new record. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. But my quote was like, I quoted them $1,000 and they wrote back and said, sorry, our manager only approves $200 for this. And so I'm like, but I'm like, I could use $200, so I'm in this like stupid position of feeling kind of desperate. And so like, I didn't want to just, you're not supposed to write back and say, okay, I'll do it for 200. You're
Yeah,
supposed to
exactly.
write back and say, okay, 200, I normally can't do that, but here's what I can do. Let me know if you can accept this. So I basically gave him a very, very limited thing, which involved him doing the sketches, maybe using some stock art, stock illustrations, and maybe adding some modifiers to it, make it easy. And he's like, oh my God, thank you so much. I'll get back to you. Let me know. I'll let you know. Never heard back from him. And he was a great client too. So it's like, okay, that didn't work. So I'm just in this like boat where I'm getting opportunities that feel like they can take me out of my situation, like a little bit of a savior. I feel a little bit desperate. And then so I'm willing, what integrity am I willing to sacrifice? Well, I discounted my rate on that one
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
because I need to work. And then another one, I could have just when we said, you know what, maybe I'll trust this guy on the scan and explored it. Maybe it wouldn't be, but I think it probably is. So I'm like, I'm not doing that. So just I'm like, I'm getting tested with like, how desperate am I? And it's so annoying, Zach. I got to tell you, I don't know what to do.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Where, I mean, when I was I'm checking out jobs and I'm going down, I'm like, the going rate for some of this stuff is just off the wall. But I am seeing much more of a trend towards they're settling in much lower than where I'm at. But some of the rates that they've got people at, I'm like, you're paying less than a teacher for this and expecting a bachelor's degree, 10 years experience, have to
Hmm.
know entire video production. I'm like, who do you think that you're getting here? But really, it really does make me think if it comes back to I feel like the market is kind of saturated some ways in creative arts, not necessarily skilled people in creative arts. And that's not even necessarily to put these people down, but somebody, say, fresh out of college or somebody that's taught themselves that doesn't quite have a portfolio yet, but's trying to do it. They're building
Hmm.
themselves up. They're doing this like, I'm sure I could do this job, but I don't have the background to do it. I haven't done it as long. We've got a lot more people like that that I think a lot of people in today's day and age in this creator world of I've worked on TikTok videos, I've worked on stuff for my YouTube channel, I've done this for a buddy, or I studied this a little bit. They're trying to get into the field. Now there's just a million of them, and they'll take a crazy low price because they've never even really had a job for them. So for them, this actually might be good money that they're like, oh, I'm making this much. I'll go do that for you and I'll do everything. And they think that that's the way that it's supposed to go. And the unfortunate thing is that it's like, they're quickly going to realize that there's nowhere to grow in the industry. But the unfortunate part is that that could become the new norm. But I think you're going to kind of have two different industries of like, now you have the high end professional and then you have the not quite professional down here. But these people think that they're getting professional, but they're not smart enough to realize that they aren't. And hopefully, these two will kind of meet in the middle, is what I'm guessing would kind of happen. Or you will still have, hey, this is your elite. And if you're an elite designer, I can be an author right now, but I'm still no Stephen King. Stephen King is still going to be up at the top of the game.
Okay.
But I've heard about it in the music industry as well. So I went and watched that talk from Jack Conte of Patreon.
Hmm.
Um, it showed up in my feed on YouTube, which, he kind of talks about how we're getting away from a subscriber base and you're just getting fed all this other stuff. I appreciated that that one hit. And I was like, oh, yeah, Jeff was talking about that one. Great chat, great talk. And he kind of talks about that as well, as far as like, even in the paid subscriber, you're trying to get your followers that are your ones, your more elite ones. But then that's also, I think that there are elite content creators. And in today's day and age, he talks about trying to break through where sure there's Taylor Swifts that are still making tons of money and they're the elite, but that middle game trying to break through is getting to be more and more difficult for emerging artists. It's just not quite getting there. They're not able to meet their audience. They're not able to tour to get the funds that they need to get a bigger record deal and have their music featured in iTunes or wherever. And so you're kind of seeing this really, really elite musician and then kind of everybody else down below, where there's not really this middle class of musician or creator. And I feel like that same thing is starting to happen, at least in the video world, is kind of what I'm noticing as well. Is you've got these elite up here, but now you're competing with all the other elites, and it's a really hard field to stay relevant in.
Hmm.
Otherwise, now you're accepting way below a salary to sustain yourself in the industry, and it's difficult. And I'm not sure what the answer is there, but definitely for somebody like me, when I'm looking at these jobs, it's unnerving to be like, I don't know if I'm ever going to work here again. This is not good. Like, there's so few out there. So for me lately, I had one that I had gone through my whole interview process, waiting to hear back, thought that it went well, didn't get the job. And I'm like, oh, great.
Did you get a confirmation? You
Yeah,
get
I had to reach out to them and say, so I don't know if they just hadn't decided yet or not, but I was like, hey, it's kind of told me that we were all done. It's been about a week. They go, yep, we decided to go with somebody else. And so maybe they were waiting for that person to accept the offer,
Mhm.
or whatever. And honestly, I'm not too sad about it. I'm sad from the point, where I was like, here's another one down. I could have made do with that one, but it was not exactly what I was looking for. It was something that I would have had to get by with until I could find something better.
Right.
Um, then I had another interview, that went good, and it seemed to be a better opportunity than what I had originally thought. Where it was another one where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this one that much. Talked to them a little bit more. I was like, oh, actually, this seems like this could be a good opportunity. Kind of like-minded individual for the hiring manager. I think she and I saw eye to eye pretty well. And then I get an offer for a job that I interviewed for back in February. And I'm like,
Mm.
out of the blue, they call me up and they go, hey, we want to offer you this job. And I was like, what the, where did that come from?
Mm.
And it's a good job. It's one that I would want. It's one that pays well. It's one that's in my industry. It's running a creative team, and all of that.
Mhm.
And so I was like, where, what the hell just happened? Like, I was over and done with that job. It's been so long. I haven't heard anything about it. Nobody's followed up with me. Nobody's this. And then they go, yeah, we finally made it through our process. Sorry it took so long. Want to offer you the job? And I'm like, yeah, oh, great. Let's do this. So I have a job now. And
Really?
yeah, so it's pretty
Oh boy.
good. And it's like I said, it's even higher up than where I was before.
Mm.
It's a little bit of a pay raise for me, which is good. Good benefits, good all of this, good everything. And I get a little bit of time off here now. So be starting there like April 30th, I think is my first
Okay.
day. And
Okay.
I'm like, it's amazing though. The weird thing about all of this is that the weight off of my shoulders took about a week to happen. But right
Oh.
now I can finally, it feels real. It feels legitimate. I think it just took me a little bit of time to breathe that I was so much in that space. And yeah, it's a very good feeling, to have. Now I actually have to go and do the work though. That's the real hard part
Uh,
of all of that.
yeah, yeah. So what do you mean? Like how does that feel?
So I guess what I mean is my wife was asking me for a few days. She's like, "Are you okay? Like, are you happy about this?" And I go, "I'm really happy about this." And I didn't realize until like days later that I was like, that stress of almost became a habit inside of my body to be like, you need to go be doing something. You need to figure this out. You don't have things taken care of. Like I had that so much day in and day out, and I had so much struggle and stress and strife inside of myself. And I even remember thinking that before I had lost my job, I felt like I was in a really good spot personally. I had a really good routine down, really good morning routine, really good exercise routine. Had that down, and I was like, man, I'm doing really good. I'm really happy with my progress. I'm seeing progress mentally. I'm seeing progress physically. So for people that are watching us on YouTube, you'll see I'm not a not a physically intimidating person. I've kind of been fairly skinny. I'm an athletic build, but very skinny, and I've always struggled. I used to get teased all the time when I was a kid with how skinny I was, and I just can't put weight on. I'm one of those people that no matter what I do, no matter what I eat, no matter what I try, I can't put weight on. I'll just be skinny for probably the rest of my life. But I was starting to see, I'm like, oh, I'm starting to tone up a little bit more, putting on a couple pounds. This is good. Feeling good mentally. Our family is doing really, really well. And then I lost the job and poof, my morning routine went to crap. My mental state went to crap. And as much as I tried to get back on board with that, I just felt stressed out all the time. Not sleeping is good. And like I said, I was having a hard time enjoying things, even though I would take breaks. A lot of the time I'd be distracted if I'm watching a movie and being like, why are you watching this movie? What job did you just miss that you weren't applying for right now, that you weren't putting
Right.
in for?
Yeah.
And it was just constant stress. And it really, really was, future worrying of you really could be losing your house right now. Like you could lose the house. And what's that conversation going to be like for the kids? And where are you going to go? And what situation that's going to be in? And then, with the economy that we live in, we do not live in a very, I think some people would say we do live in a very forgiving society. And at the same times, we also don't. Where that goes through, that hits my credit score. The detriment to my credit score to get back to where I am would take years and years and years and years. And so it's just that constant worry and that constant stress. And, fortunately, we had a little bit of time that we could work through things and have some money, but really it was not a lot. Like I was not going to last here much longer, like another couple weeks. So I got lucky in that
Mm.
regard that we were really going to have to make some serious changes in the next couple weeks of like, I'm going to have to cash in my 401k. I'm going to have to start doing that. We're going to have to sell this house. We're not going to be able to make our bills. I'm going to have to go sell my car or something like that. Like major life changes were very, very close to having to happen. And so, but I think, long story short is my body was in such a routine of feeling that stress that I'm telling myself that I need to do this, that I need to feel this way. So that when I didn't need to feel that way anymore, my body and my mind had a hard time letting go of that. And
Mm.
again, I don't know where that comes from. If it's that hustle of I need to provide. This is all going to fall apart. I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. What are people going to think of you? How are you going to go talk to your kids? And how desperate are you going to get for money and hitting people up? Where I am I going to start telling people like, you don't understand. I'm at the bottom of the barrel here. Can you please help me out? Is there anything that you can do to to help me out and help me get through this? And just
Mm.
that constant worry and stress just did not go away immediately. It took a little bit of time to go away, but it is gone
Yeah.
now. I do feel back to myself and I'm back to my good old normal routine or getting back into it and starting to feel it. So for people that don't know this, Jeff and I record these a few weeks in advance. And so this is about I actually got the job offer about a week and a half or almost 2 weeks ago now. It was right after Jeff and I had met last. And so I've been holding on to that one to save that little tidbit of
Yeah.
information to be like, hey, I got a job, but I wanted to save it for the podcast. But it's a big thing. It was a big deal for me. And it came from the least likely place that I expected it to come from. Again, we talked about
Mm.
that before. It's like when you're working, 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 it seems to never come where you're focused at. It comes from somewhere totally different that you tend to get blindsided by. And while that's not 100% true, I think it's one of those things where things don't fall in your lap, but if you take advantage of the opportunities that are there when they're there, you never know which door is going to open up for you, but you have to be willing to walk through it. It kind of feels another one of those kind of a domino for me.
Yeah. Well, gosh, Zach, it's congratulations on
Thanks.
getting the job and having that weight off your shoulders finally gone. And I can't imagine the amount of relief that you feel Hearing that, because I have so much compassion for your story, because for you sharing all that, because of my direct experience that I'm going through, right now, and the the pressures that we have on ourselves as men in America to do all of that, to carry all of that. And it's easier when you've got other people that are sharing the workload with you, but when you feel like it's all on you, and like it's so incredibly difficult, and so I don't know. I really feel you there. So I'm really glad to see that that you've gotten somewhere, and then it came in like a nice unlikely place, and that there's a happy ending to that
Yeah,
story.
exactly. Well, it's a good opportunity. Well, and I think the interesting thing is that you and I have talked about a lot that I still think is in some ways the point of this podcast in a lot of different ways is, we've got these old habits or these mindsets kind of instilled from us. And while yes, as a man, I feel very, very proud and honored to be able to provide for my family. I like to be able to do that. It makes me feel good to know like I'm putting this out there. I'm working my butt off for the betterment of these other human beings and these other individuals that I care dearly about. It does make me feel good. At the same time, we do have these works and these jobs. Like I'm going to go back to work now, and I'm going back to a full-time job. And while yes, this is a job that I'm excited about that does speak to my skill set pretty well, there are going to be a lot of parts of that if I was going to draw up my perfect job as a human being, I think less than 1%, if 1% even feels high. Even for people that love their jobs, if they could draw it up on a piece of paper, what would their perfect job be? That's not what they're doing. They might be doing a piece of that, but we're pushed so hard to do these things and accept these realities, and then at the end of the day say thank you, this is so great, and then we're going to go and be doing these tasks. It's like I hate doing this. I hate doing this part of the job. This is not there. But then it makes you ask. It's like, well, is that a job then? What makes a job? Like, does it have to come? Do you have to do the parts that you don't like in order to do the parts that you do like? Is that just inherent with job? When we say work, is that what work means? Because work in a lot of times has a negative connotation of like, I'm going to go work in the garden. And for some people, that's great. They love working in the garden. Me, I hate it. I hate working in a garden. I'm not good at it. Everything dies in my place. I'm not good. I don't enjoy it. I would much rather be doing something else. However, I can also sit back and work on a video and love it and think that it's great. And that's work for me. But is that really work then? And what that means, and how do we find what we want to do and survive? I don't know what the answer is for that, but I don't think that my journey with that is yet done, especially with today's day and age of the emerging AI technologies and all of this that are threatening jobs and all that. And where am I going to find myself there? And how am I going to
Hmm.
provide? And if this job goes away eventually, what do I do now? If it's this hard now, how much harder is it going to be in 5 years from now when I really, really need that security and I'm less, of this hungry 22-year-old that can do it for half the price type of a thing?
Yeah.
Where do I go? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Considering
think my
that.
journey is very far from over.
Yeah, good point. And of course, that hungry 22-year-old is going to snatch up all the jobs because that's what the employers want. They don't want a an experienced veteran to do the job that a young, hungry 22-year-old fresh out of college who has no, he doesn't really know how to stand up for themselves very well at that point and is a bit more um, eager and naive, about how the world works and all of that. So I know I was there, and you know,
And you get into this part where it really is almost like, more money, more problems. I have this house that now I have to support. It's cost me more and more money, so I've got to have that higher echelon up there, or otherwise I'm making sacrifices in there. So,
Mhm.
you kind of build your lifestyle around, I was making this much money, now I'm making this much, I'm making this much, I'm going up. Well, now I have to be able to support that lifestyle. And I am inherently seeing the huge risk in that it's like, oh, now I've gotten my kids used to this lifestyle. And while I really don't care about at the end of the day is how much money I'm making, as long as it supports me and my family. Well, yeah, but now what I need to support me and my family is way up here. It ain't down here. And, I become jealous of people that can do a job. Say, like, I don't think I could ever be a plumber, for example. Not to put down plumbers or anything, but it's a very, at least in my eyes, it feels like a very repetitive task. That is, for the majority of the time, you're going to get called out for one job over and over and over, depending on what you're doing. And I know inside of plumber, I'm using a stereotypical plumber. Apologies to all the plumbers out there. We do value you, but I think you know what I mean, that it's like, I can go and do that. There's not a lot of necessarily future stress with that job. I go in, I do what I can that day, I come home, and I'm done. And I'm sure that they would argue, oh, but we have stress of materials, we have stress of, this is a difficult client. I understand that. But what I mean is, you don't necessarily have a 1 year goal as a freelance plumber. They assign you a job, you go out, you work on that job, you come home, and you're done. I'm jealous of that. That's not enough for me. I need more out of a job, out of a career, out of a life. I wish that I didn't. I wish that I was more satisfied with a job like that, or that I could work in a movie theater. That working in a movie theater would be enough for me. Because I love that job, but it was also like, it was a joke when I was working there, and I felt like crap when I was working there about myself. And when they offered me a promotion, because I showed up on time when I was like, I'm quitting, I'm out of here, and they go, what if we promote you? We'll give you a promotion. I mean, you're one of our best employees. You're on time. And I'm like, that's a gauge of a good employee, is he showed up on time. And I was like, I've got to get out of here. I need more out of a career than this. Like, this is not enough for me. I wish that it was, in a lot of different ways, that I could be satisfied with that. But I'm not. I want to strive for more. I've got more ambition. I want to push myself more. I want to be able to make things. So it's a weird mix of things.
Yeah, as someone who's creative like you and has a video background and who loves cinema as much as you would think that like making your own films would be something that you could do. Obviously, that requires money and resources and access to make the films you want to make, but you need to have a job to pay for your house in the meantime while you make that film. It's not like you can just you kind of have to have a really good safety bed to be able to do something like that. That's taking a big risk.
Yeah, I'm curious from your point of view as well. It's something that I've always thought about, because that's the exact point of my career when it took a big right turn. And the issue for me was, again, hence why I love hearing background stories, why I even reached out for the podcast, is hearing your perspective on this, is that for me, from a video background, it you almost having a roadmap early on would have done me a lot of good. Because as soon as I started a family very young, but as soon as I started that family, that kind of killed that dream for me in a lot of different ways. But really, it's not to say that you can't have a family and do this, but it goes back to kind of what we talked about one time before, was when I remember when I read Steve Jobs' book, and I go, oh, being Steve Jobs and running Apple and starting that company is actually not as difficult as I thought was going to be. But the person that you have to be to do it, I'm not willing to be. I'm not willing to
Right.
be that person. And so I was not willing to be that person with a family that was like, yeah, we're going to have a family, but it kind of has to be two separate lives. You've got to be willing to have dad gone all of this time so that I can pursue my career and my dream of making movies. And you're going to have to raise the family over here while that happens. And I'm like, I'm not willing to be that dad. I want to spend more time with my kids than I do with my career. So as soon as I made that choice, that idea of making movies went away from me. That was done. And I'm still okay with that. That's fine. But if I would have, like I said, I love my family. I think that it's great. But it's one of those where I'm really curious if past Zach knew that it's like I might have held off on a family a little bit longer until I was maybe in my later 30s and been like, oh, I could do this. I could make movies. But then now you run into the thing of like, well, yeah, but then who would you be at the end of the day? You might not have a family then. You might have missed that opportunity. Where now I have friends and family that are like, I think I missed my opportunity to have kids. I don't think that that's in the cards for me. I don't have any serious relationships. I've never had a serious relationship. I don't think I'm probably ever going to have a serious relationship. I'm more of an independent person. And, now I'm 46 years old, and the longest relationship I've had is a year and a half. I think that's done for me. I chose a career. And I'm like, I can't imagine that. But they might be looking at me the same way and like, I can't believe he just gave up on his career or his dream and stuff like that. And that's not true. My dream just shifted. But I'm curious with you, with where you are in life and your path, and say even graphic design, do you feel that pull at times that you have to choose between your personal life and your professional life? Or do you feel like they are kind of one and the same? My personal life is my professional life, type of a thing. Was that ever a pull for you?
Not really, because I feel like my personal and my professional life are so intertwined and blended that I don't have much separation from that. I think when I was younger and I was working at McDonald's, clearly I had a work and then I would go home. But I had friends at work and I was dating one of the girls I worked with. So it's like it was still blended. And after we would go to work together, we would come home, and then even at Go Media, I was still like, my wife worked there. So it was like very blended. I didn't have much separation at all. And I don't think that I prefer that, because the way that I live my life, it feels really hard to compartmentalize anything because of how locked into the sense of authenticity that I feel, that everything that I do has to have this like feeling that I'm here, I'm doing it, I'm in the right place, rather than like I have to temporarily leave my body, so to speak, or my presence,
Yeah.
and then go do something and then come back to the life. It's like, no, everything that I do, I bring my whole self to it. And so it's really hard for me. And I think, on my palms, I have these two straight lines across, which, it's called the Simeon line. And they talk about that in palmistry, where it's like, the head and the heart line are like merged into one line. Um, and so
Oh,
having
you don't
something
have
like
like
that,
two? Is that what you're saying? You don't have like
right. I don't.
oh, yeah, yeah. Interesting.
And, and so they say that it's like your head and your heart are like merged into one track. Your thoughts and your feelings, your logic, your emotions are kind of like all kind of jumbled together in like one thing. So there's not really any separation. And you can look at it as work as like the masculine aspect, and like home and life as the feminine aspect. And you can have a separation there, but for me, I have like issues with separation, and everything is like blending in. I don't feel like the world respects life enough. I just don't feel like you have to shut off lots of yourself to function at work, which the priority of work is usually always about money. It's not about like, it's always about money and getting more and being and optimizing and more productive. And so it's like the incentives at work I feel like are kind of inherently anti-life in some ways, and unless you're doing really well, where you go to your work and you're productive, then you can go home and you've got like your gym routine, your home, your family, you've got all that, you got a really good balance there. I personally see that contradiction, and I have a really hard time fitting into that. Which kind of leads me into something that I was looking at this week, which was I was feeling this pull to like just get away from it all, and my girlfriend has talked about wanting to get away for some solitude, and like maybe find a place where she's always fantasized about going to this like cabin in the woods and writing, like isolating herself from society so that she can do her creative work in private and not have anybody bothering her, and then also tap into like her deepest spiritual longings, without the pressures of the world. And I really relate to that. And I thought she just spoke to one of a mentor that she's connected with, and who's a writer, a copy editor, and told her that she used to go to a convent to write. And I was like, if she's going to go to a convent, I really like that idea. Like, is there anything like, can I go to like a monastery? And I started thinking about like becoming a monk, like that idea, that lifestyle. There's a lot of appeal to it for me,
Sure.
because the thing that's most important to me is my spiritual calling, and all of that. And where do you get to practice that in this life? You kind of, you don't really have the place for it unless you're part of a religious organization. So I was
Sure.
looking up if they have any secular type of monasteries around, like are there any non-religious places where
Yeah.
you can go and be supported in doing like really important work for yourself in life? And yeah, so that was my train of thought. It's
Well, and I'm curious, I'll be very interested to hear where both of you end up on that because that's one thing that's been inherent with writers, especially, is this get away and write. So many famous authors have done that. And, I remember there was a musician that I love, and now I'm worried that I'm confusing him. I'm pretty sure I'm right. Is Andrew McMahon did a song, had a band, Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. Cecilia and the Satellite was one of his more famous songs, and he was in a couple different
Mhm.
bands. And he would talk about whenever he was doing an album, he would go off in the middle of the woods in a cabin and work on the entire album and work on the lyrics and all of that. And he was just like, look, this is how I do it, but I've got to be gone for about a month or so. And I'm going to be out there. I'll be out by myself working on this thing, doing
Mhm.
this like a cabin in the middle of the woods. And that's just my process. This is just how that works for me. And I've always been fascinated by that. And that was, I guess, the thing for me as well, is that I kind of felt that same thing, is that I was like, look, if I'm going to go make a movie, I'm going to have to go and do it. And I can't be here. I can't be around that. And, and that's why I was like, yeah, I'm not willing to do that now. I was, a year ago or, maybe even a day ago. And then I held my son and I'm like, nope, I can't do that anymore.
Mhm.
It is interesting as a parent, everything that they say, a lot of the stereotype of what people say is true. Your world does change in an instant. And I remember that. And I talked with my dad about it and friends with that. I was like, holy shit, I thought that they were kind of making that up. Like I knew that what you meant, but until you go through it, it really is weird how much your mind and thought process changed. At least for me, it was. But then to your point as well, like these even like jobs where you do, it's like, okay, you're going to leave your personal life behind 8 hours a day, and then you can go back to your life. But right now, we own your life, and we own that, and you get to do that. And shout out to a show, Severance. Have you ever watched Severance or
Oh yeah,
watched?
yeah, yeah. I loved
Pretty
it.
much exactly what that show is. We own you here. You don't get that part of your life. When you go home, you can have that life, but when you're here, we own you.
Yeah.
Type of a thing, and that mindset and what that means and how you separate yourself and that it isn't healthy. I think is kind of the biggest point of all of that. And
Hmm.
it is weird that, yeah, the appeal of being a monk, it sounds awesome. It sounds so great. Where I'm like, wait, I can live my work and, sustain myself and be a part of all of this. And, it sounds really, really, really appealing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like when I've talked about like how I feel about work and life and what should I do with myself, sometimes people say, well, you could join a commune or something like that. And I'm I don't want to go join somebody else's commune
yeah,
or eco village or intentional community where there's cliques and there's people, there's belief systems that maybe I don't subscribe to. It's like, yeah, yeah, you got to help out in the community, like do your part, figure out what role you fill in the community. It's like, I'm not really attracted to that necessarily. Like, this is so easy for cults to form and
sure.
weird hierarchical dynamics. Like, no, I want solitude. Like, sure, I appreciate community, but like, if I want to get in touch with my spirit, what the source of all life, like, if I want to get in touch with that, you do that in solitude and quiet. Um, if I want to work on a record or make some music, it's like it's nice to get away from it all and just to have an intense focus. But it's kind of a luxury. Like, how can I? Where's a place where I can go that you can that's actually affordable just to go be alone? Um, like you need a cabin in the woods, and what are you going to get on Airbnb?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now Kara found a place not too long ago. She went to like a silent meditation retreat, and not too far from here. And I think she said it was like $100 a night or something like that. But they don't bother you, like you just go there and you're silent for 3 days, and there's food you can get, and and it's really quiet. And they've got some stuff to support that, and they're not pushing any ideology on you. It's like literally a retreat for silence, and I appreciate that. But even at $100 a day, that's $3,000 a month. If you're supposed to, are you supposed to have a job and make $50,000 a year so you can afford to have solitude sometimes? Like to me, that just doesn't make sense. That's why I like the monk lifestyle, because they are they've renounced most of the material world. They don't go work a job at Starbucks so then they can go be a monk after hours. I mean, it takes a certain kind of person with a very strong spiritual commitment to renounce the world and to kind of go into the mountains as a hermit, and that's something that I was looking into, and I actually found a couple of good resources that were speaking right exactly to this problem, where they talk about, is there like an institution or a place for secular monasticism where someone could take a year off of their life to go to a place that allows them non-religious, but with support to allow them to process important life decisions, allow them to go through a transition or a phase in life where they don't have it all figured out, and they have to get off the treadmill for a minute, because the treadmill is going to keep going, and no matter how tired you are, you got to keep going. But is there a place where you can rest, that you can afford? You don't have to work, There just doesn't seem to be that. I don't see it unless you're part of a church or something like that. Or who's going to catch you if you fall? There's nothing, you know. It's
Yeah, it's
it's
a
a privilege.
really
You need to have money to be able to afford something like that. Unless you are a part of a religious, if I were a Buddhist, I could go do it.
exactly.
I mean, I admire a lot of teachings in Buddhism, but I'm not going to go there and wear the sash and meditate in front of the Buddha statue or the Dalai Lama. I don't care about any of that. That's not my spirituality.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing about all of that is that it's like how these religions have done it is that, they're being supported by other people. In order to do that, they're saying, oh yeah, they're having food brought to them, donations, money, all of that. And I love that and I respect that. But yeah, to your point, unless you subscribe to their religion, which there's plenty of people that are like, look, I like this part of it, but that's like 8% of your religion. I'm not buying into the rest of this. Or, hey, in Christian values, I love the Ten Commandments. I think that they're great, and it's a great. The rest of this makes zero sense to me. This doesn't make any sense, or that doesn't make any sense. So no,
Hmm.
I'm not going to go be a priest now for this and buy into that lifestyle. So if you don't 100%, and it's an interesting thought for anybody, and I feel like today's day and age, it's coming up more and more and more where you have these people that are like, look, I'm feeling a spiritual awakening, but I don't know what that means because it feels, I mean, that part, yeah, a little bit, but it doesn't really feel like that. And no, I don't really feel like a born again Christian, not by any means, but this part, like when you say this, yeah, that connects with me, but no, I don't feel
Hmm.
that. I don't feel this. So how do I kind of find out more information? And again, it's it's almost like all of these religions should understand this better than anybody else, where it's like I have an order of, it's like I'm looking at a menu of 10 different religions, and which one do you want? Well, I don't want any of those. There's, what about mine, the one that I like, that, no, we don't serve that here. It's like, well, yeah, we think that these are the only ones that can exist. This is the only thought process that somebody can have. You should know
Hmm.
just by the fact that you're different than this other religion, that should be the case, that there should be more open. And as a society, you're right. That's, I've never really thought about it that way, is that we don't really support that train of thought. Otherwise, you'd have to call it a religion,
Hmm.
and type of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see in like Silicon Valley, in the elite tech circles, people like Jack from Twitter takes regular silent retreats, for himself. He meditates. All these people go off into this like sort of psychedelic, uh, not Burning Man, but something, they have like a practice where they get away from it and they like try to get their ideas, but these are the technological elite, it's like a luxury. They get to go have their retreats off the grid. But like for the working class, you don't really get that unless you're part of the Christian church. But even then, so, Kara brought up a good point when I mentioned that. She's like, well, someone's got to pay for it. Someone's got to pay for the cabin that you're going to stay in and the food you're going to eat. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I know, so it would be nice if there was a system or a place where we construct it. I mean, if I had the money, I could build it myself,
Sure,
Um,
exactly.
and I read a blog article of a guy who had this idea who was going to build a secular monastery. It's called thewisesloth.com. And he had some good insights on what he wanted. And he made up so many good points. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about. An intellectual monastery for people who are burned out and jaded and alienated from modernity and want to go and have a quiet, introverted, it respects the introvert, and a place where they can go. And there's another one called Raven's Bread. It's like a blog, a place in North Carolina, a couple, they are respecting the art of being a hermit. And they've got a place where they allow someone to live there in exchange for helping out around the property and stuff like that. But it's for sabbaticals, it's for retreats. And she has spent 30 years living in a convent. So she was a nun for 30 years and took a vow of poverty and all of this kind of stuff. And he was a former priest. So he also lived in like a religious, monastery place. But now they're living together in their home in North Carolina, like kind of free from all of that. But even before this, 6 years, she spent 6 years living in a shed that didn't even have indoor plumbing. So
Jeez.
so it's like, there are ways you could do it, but it's like somebody had to own that shed for you to stay in, and I think she ended up marrying the guy that owned it. But I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't think I read into their story too deeply. But I feel like they're kindred spirits, and these people are like, this is what I'm talking about. Me and Kara both love this idea. She's like, is this us? Is this our future? Like, like two contemplative, uh, independent thinker hermit types who just want to go do their thing, not have to fit themselves into the world where they don't fit into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that is to be able to do that once again, to your point, is that there's got to be an exchange of money. Okay, so who's going to start this? How is that going to go? How do you build this up? And then, we living in that society because there is no system. I mean, you look at systems like welfare, or something like that, where, hey, you're not making enough money, society is going to pick you up. Here's welfare, and we'll support you until you can get back on your feet. But really, it's supporting you until you get back on your feet. So it's like, but there's no system for something like that again, where you're like, hey, unless you've made it rich and elite, they don't, it's almost like society doesn't think that you can burn out, because then like, well, yeah, I worked so hard to get all this. Okay, now I've burned out. I'm going to go on this ayahuasca retreat that's now like $20,000 because these ayahuasca trips are now becoming
Mm-hmm.
trendy or whatever.
Yeah,
And
very
I'm going
much.
to go burn all that and go in the middle of the jungle and, save myself. But that's for them. But if you have not made it, then that's not an option for you. And you're just going to, go grind, 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 grind. We don't respect the human being or the human spirit in that regard, maybe, is potentially a takeaway on that, that it's like, are we actually doing that or are we not? And that's what we're telling society again, is like, well, you better get back to work. That guy worked harder than you. He worked harder than you, so he deserved that, type of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you find ways to make that work for yourself without this huge exchange of money? To go like, yeah, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
burned out. I need a break. And okay, yeah, let's do it this way. I just need a sabbatical. You work for the
Yeah.
company, and some companies are good about that. Like, yeah, we'll let you go to this conference. We'll pay for you to go. And that's how they kind of support that a little bit. But, if you aren't at the company and you're a freelancer and a content creator, where's your sabbatical? It's not there. And
Oh
you just
yeah.
gotta grind, grind, grind. Yeah.
Yeah, being an independent freelancer slash gig worker, I mean, the allure of that escaping the 9 to 5 rat race is definitely diminishing as that becomes your new 9 to 5 or your new 24/7. Because you don't get time off, you don't get that break. You have to continue to grind. All these content creators talk about themselves burning out, feeling like once they start, and if they catch virality, they're like, okay, I've caught it. Now I have to like make sure can stay posting, stay relevant, stay in that algorithm to kind of keep it up, and then that living the dream, it starts to feel soul crushing. And I think, wow, then they're really in it. Where the heck do they go after that point? It's like, oh, they're so privileged, they're lucky, they got viral, but
Sure.
it's like when we're getting into state, especially with like AI taking jobs away and stuff, it's especially for creative folks. And the price of our creative work, it goes down. And I think you sent me like an image. The areas with the most unemployment or the most underemployment in graphic design was like number two, or it was
Yeah.
on that list somewhere. And it's like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but
Exactly. And when there was a lot of arts even listed there, like, and what
yeah.
major you would have, it's like, oh, all these art majors. It's like, oh, great. Yeah, not a great feeling.
I want to share one thing though, that when I think about work, okay, I have like my main consciousness is when I wake up in the morning, and like the thing that's on, the operating system that is ruling my mind is like what you said. I gotta make sure I'm doing something to get out of the situation, to hunt, to go figure out, go find money, go work, go do something. But that is not the only consciousness that I have. And it's so funny. That's like the main operating system. But like when I meditate and when I am relaxed and I feel into it, and also if I take any sort of psychedelic substance, even a small amount of it, I have this like feeling, and I think about work, and it's like work seems like so foreign to this idea. Work and chasing money seems like such a distraction to what's actually important. Like when I take any of these substances or when I'm meditating, it's like this what is actually important is exactly what I'm doing, which is like the love, the healing, the feeling work that is like, if you imagine every single human is like interconnected through some force. And when I'm doing this and I'm thinking about love and I'm healing all of these wounds and I'm coming to truth and authenticity, this is helping the human race. But when I think about going to work at X company to try to like make dollars, it's almost laughable how backwards that is, and how distorted that I feel like my our mindset is. That is not helping the human race. But what actually is healthy and helpful is the stuff that I'm actually doing, the stuff that's not paying, things that I need to go to a hermitage to do. That's important. So I feel like that's my real work that my heart is really in. But I'm not getting dollars to support my whatever. So it's like the two different trains of thought. And then when I'm not in that state, there's like the scarcity, fear-based squirrel mode that wants to go hoard nuts because he's afraid he's going to run out and he's got to go do this. And it's like fight for survival. Even when you are safe and you have enough, you've got good stuff in your life. But that feeling of survival and fighting for more doesn't ever go away, no matter how much money you have. It's like it's a operating system. It's like taking over your consciousness that doesn't exist when I'm like in a healthier space. So I'm like,
Yeah.
shit, man.
Well, and you bring up an interesting question. I've kind of got two. I know that we're getting a little long here, but I've got two things. One, I
Mhm.
know that and I want to talk more about your road trip and all of that, but overall, when you did that road trip, after leaving Go Media and everything, did that was that really, I mean, I think I've heard you describe it as a spiritual awakening. Did it feel that way? And was that part of the reason was because you're like, I could get away and I focused on these other things. So even though I discovered a bunch of things that maybe I don't agree with or believe in as much now, I was at least allowing myself to be exposed to that and, seeking that part of the journey now later in life. And you're like, well, I don't know if I can afford to do that now. I was able to afford that then. Was that kind of, and did you realize, was that kind of what you were after when you did that, or didn't know what you were after at the time?
No, I was definitely after finding time for myself to discover myself. My dad asked me like, "What are you running from?" He kind of like made a comment about that. I don't think he was very serious about it, but he said it, and it made me kind of like disturbed because I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was,
Yeah, I feel
I
like
was,
the
I
opposite.
was, I was going toward what is real
Yeah.
and what really matters to me, and I
Yes.
was like it's like breaking out of an oppressive environment, and then being like, I'm going to go towards what is healthy and what is real, and to discover what that is. All I know is there's a fire burning in my heart. I got to follow it, and so I did that. And like I said, I was like dating and chasing girls a little bit,
Sure.
but it's like the whole time I have this like, you can call it a guardian angel or like my higher self or higher consciousness within me that was there with me and guiding me and helping me. Like I felt like it was this gentle presence that was always there that I was communicating with, feeling with my feeling base, every night when I would go to sleep at night, when I'm figuring out where I'm going to go to the next location, I was very drawn to going to different nature spots throughout the country and walking through there. And I had a different perspective when I was going to these national parks and going on these hiking trails, spending a lot of time in nature. I thought like, oh, I'm getting a chance to go to these national parks and like get to see these tourist sites. But what was actually happening in my mind when I was walking through these trails was like this feminine presence that was basically saying like, look what they've done to me. They've owned me and turned me into a national park that you pay to go see. That's curated and heavily groomed, and it's like man's idea of what nature is, almost like a Disney-fied nature park that's clean and devoid of any harsh predators. That is like their version, man's version of nature. And sure, there's a little bit of like we're protecting nature instead of building a city here. So
Sure.
it's like it's nice to have a place where you can go experience that. But this overwhelming feeling of me was like this feminine presence of like you call it Gaia, Mother Earth, nature, or the feminine half of God. It was like showing me ways in which she has been like pillaged, exploited, resources extracted. I go to the Grand Canyon and I'm all like, all I can see is like a giant quarry. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
Like, like ancient past of like resource extraction. There's like no life there anymore. And like, and I went up to Devil's Tower and there's like, Devil's Tower is like this, like earth monument that looks almost like a tree stump that's like massive. It's like a rock mountain formation. And I had this impression that it really was like a tree stump or like maybe back in ancient times, there used to be massive giant trees like in the movie Avatar. And so like when I watched movie Avatar, it felt like, oh my gosh, this is like some truth here about
Sure.
like our ancient past, and we've lived with so much, colonialism and resource extraction, the way man looks at their place on earth, their place within nature. They feel like they're from outer space and we're kind of like coming into this planet and extracting resources that we can now use for ourselves. So there's that whole aspect. But that was this presence that I was interacting with that was teaching me about life and what really mattered and like man's relation to life. And and of course, as I'm chasing girls, I keep getting hit over the head that like it's the girl, it's not the girl that I'm chasing, it's me that I want, that I'm projecting onto her, some aspect of me that I'm putting on her and then making her my savior. Like if I can get her to like me or something, that I'm gonna feel good and be complete. It's like no, through my chase and through my experiences, it was like no, 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 no. Doors kept closing. You are it, Jeff. Everything that you're seeking is you. Like you are. So that was the
Yeah.
message.
Yeah, and
And I
for
couldn't have
me,
experienced that without going out there and trying that.
yeah, and for me, that felt much more of almost like, that classic warrior tale or spiritual leader where it's like, hey, to actually be a full-fledged member of our society, you need to go have a spiritual journey, type of thing. It felt much more like that. Like you said, even in the way that you tell it and brought it up as far as like walking towards something, not away from it. Like, no, 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 this was in some ways, it's kind of overstating it or oversimplifying it, but like a coming of age story,
Yeah.
type of a journey. The other
Yeah.
question that I have that I'm curious about is I've thought about this a lot. That I was like, in an ideal world, and what I would want to get away from it, would the arts have to be any part of it for you? Meaning, like, could you live without graphic design? Could you have that type of a hermit experience without a computer or without a drums or guitar or something like that? How much is art interwoven into who you are? So from a creative perspective, like if you're talking to a creative community, to be like, here's how much that it is, because I've thought a lot that I'm like, actually, I don't know if it, as much as I love doing it and I want to be a part, I don't know if that's a requirement for me anymore. As much as the requirement might be that I'm like, I need to be able to have movies be there. Like I couldn't have without art. I don't know if I need to be the one creating it, but I would need to have access to something there. What about for
Hmm.
you?
Yeah. My personality, I feel like I need my laptop. I need to have access to the internet. I, you know, the way I make music, I don't make music with instruments around. I'm not a physical musician. I make music through electronic, with through my computer, and the way I do it, it's like it's not like I've got music in my head that I'm trying to get out into the world by playing these instruments. It's not like an expression of me in that way, but it's almost like I like to learn about the music that I'm creating and almost like wondering how it works. And there's like so it's like a relationship to sound and to melody that I'm like working with that I experience when I'm making music. Um, I don't think I'm your typical musician that is like that. Having said that, what could I go to like a hermitage or a monastery where I had to renounce that? I think that would be fine temporarily, for a while. But I think part of my purpose on here is to write or speak and talk about this and consume other people's voices. That's why I love podcasts so much, and I love what YouTube has done to allow ordinary people to kind of voice their story and tell their story, and we all are listening to it. Because to me, that's connecting me with the innermost essence of all these different people's perspectives. So like the left and the right political divide, like hearing both of their perspectives and being able to kind of like come to some sort of a like cohesive middle ground, if you will. Like, what's the essence of this side? What's the essence of that side? What is it that we really need? We're all humanity expressing different needs and grievances that we have. So without the internet, I just feel like I wouldn't have access to that in the way that I do now. That is one great thing about being alive at this time, is being able to have access to all of that. And so much of my spirit shows me things and inspires me through synchronicity and through media that I consume. Like watching a film like Avatar hits you on a soul level that's like, that's like complementing my lived experience in real life. So it's like I go out there and I live my life, and then I kind of see it reflected back in movies or the storytelling and books and media. So it's like it's this interchange, this relationship. And then of course if I get a chance to do it, I will put my voice out there. So that way it's not like I'm just consuming the voices and opinions of like the Hollywood elite and like what they care about, because they're the only movies that you get to see on Netflix.
Hmm.
You don't get to see like the independent, you don't your neighbor's film. If you had to make a film, like what would that be like? But anyway, like, no, so I think I would need both of it, to
Yeah.
be honest. So it's like, if I had a retreat, I would definitely bring my laptop and, my creative gear just
Yeah,
to,
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was curious about. So then, as we wrap up here, love to go through some inspirations, things that you're into right now. What's tickling your fancy these days?
well, shit. Okay. So I told you about these secular monasteries.
Yeah.
That was a big one. And I'd like to share a couple links with you of what I've discovered. There was like, um, well, okay. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but
We'll link it.
there's like,
We'll link it for you all.
yeah, we'll link it. But there's like this idea of the meta crisis or like this poly crisis or people talking about the state of the world and what we need to do. And that was like one of the blogs that I read where he talked about there needs to be like an intellectual monastery for people. I don't necessarily know if I agree with his like whole worldview, of course, but like I loved that idea. And that's one of the articles that I read. And then of course these other ones that we talked about. So I want to share that. But other than that, this past week I watched John Berger's Ways of Seeing. Have you seen that?
Uh-uh.
It's a 1972. He wrote a book, but there was a BBC series, a four-part series called Ways of Seeing, and narrated by this guy named John Berger. And he talks about art and our relationship with it as a viewer, and especially European Renaissance art and the values that they're painting and talking about, and how that changes our consciousness of what we value by consuming the art of these like elites. And he gets into concepts such as the male gaze, how men look at women and women look at themselves being looked at. I just find it's like Kara and I talk about this whole time, and we've talked about this like ad nauseum since the beginning of our relationship. Is this idea of being a woman and knowing that you are being looked at and kind of assessed all the time
Yeah.
based off of your appearance. And as most men don't go through life thinking that way or feeling like that. And so I've been, in this rabbit hole where I've been deconstructing the male gaze, deconstructing what it is to see, to look. Because when you're in art school, they teach you how to look and draw a nude model, and you are drawing shapes, lines, shadows, and appreciating this like woman or man up there on the stage, in life drawing as like an art object, as a way of seeing. And he also talks about animals and like why we look at animals and how we've taken animals out of the wild and put them into a zoo and we go and we look at them. And he just talks about the psychology of like, what is that? And I just love it. It's extraordinary for 1972. It's like the guy was way ahead of his time.
That is pretty fascinating, especially from the animal thing, that it's, we always seem to be after unique experiences. And so it might just seem something as simple as like, oh, I heard about this thing, an elephant. Let's go grab one and go look at that elephant type of a thing. But I think what you're bringing up is that there's a little bit more to it than that. Yeah, I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds great.
Super
Sounds,
thought provoking stuff, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah, what
will.
about you, Zach? What have you been inspired by?
So once we got news of the job, it was nice. Wife came up to me and said, "Oh, we should go out and celebrate. Let's go to dinner." Something
Hmm.
like that. Because I have been annoyingly so. I'm sure to her, like, I'm not spending money on that. I'm not buying that. Oh, we're canceling this. We're not doing that. Like, I'm doing
Yeah.
everything. And I'm sure to her, like, much more annoyingly so. She is a very positive person and very much believes she's great. She's been great for me to help get through this. And she's much more of a, hey, you're going to get or you're going to attract what you put out there type of a thing. Just think positively, stay happy, stay good. Let's keep thinking. I know that we're going to get through this. I have a good feeling about all this. And, she'd be the first one that if you went to ask, she goes, I knew you were going to get that job. The way that it went and the way that you talked about it, she was like, of course you were going to get that one. I was like, yeah, but all this time. And she goes, no, I was telling you from the beginning, I have a really good feeling about this one. I think that you're going to get it. Just took a little bit while longer, but she was positive the entire time about it.
Fun.
And I was not. And so, but so anyway, so we decided I go, oh, we could go to, I was like, do you want to go to that new restaurant that you found? We like to go out and eat and try new things. And she goes, yeah, she goes, I wish we could go up to, to Palisade. Palisade's kind of in way western Colorado. But they're famous for their peaches. So for Colorado locals, Palisade's a cool place where we like getting peaches from there. They're some of the best peaches in the nation.
Hmm.
But it's a small little community, and they have a wine country up there. And we had taken a date up there, and she goes, "Yeah, but I wish we could go to our restaurant in Palisade." And I was like, "Well, why can't we? Let's just go do it." She was like, "Oh yeah," and I go, "Yeah, let's go book a hotel for the weekend. We'll drive up there. It's a 4-hour drive. Drive up there, stay the night, go eat at our restaurant, drive back the next day." And I think that trip, taking that small little trip, just me and my wife, my kids are old enough now, they can stay by themselves, hang out, take care of the dogs, and I'm sure they'd love to have a weekend away and then sit and be kids and watch video games and eat a ton of cookies, while mom and dad are gone and type of a thing. And it was amazing. I think taking that trip is really what lifted that weight finally off, where I was like, I'm enjoying something. I'm off and I can sit back and I can enjoy it. So even the ride is, beautiful. One of my favorite canyons is Glenwood Canyon here in Colorado. It's just a very beautiful drive, and to go through and be a part of it. And then it's this fun little town, Palisade, in which there are a bunch of little vineyards up there, and you can ride a bike and jump from vineyard to vineyard to vineyard and meet some cool people. Like we met one time, not this trip, but a trip before, that it was like people, I would say very similar situation to us, that they go,
Right.
I was tired of the life that I was leading, the work that I was doing. So I said no. And I came up here and we decided to build a vineyard. And we don't know anything about it, but we were going to figure it out. So now we have this vineyard. We've been doing it 2 years. We're starting to get it. We've got people going. It's making sense to us. And this is what's been fun. We take care of ourselves now. This is our little getaway. We're away from the city. We're away from that hustle and bustle. And that's for them. It was like, oh, it's fun to see that, that mentality. And a lot of people like that. And then here's this restaurant that to me is probably the best restaurant in Colorado, is up in Palisade, Colorado by, should be, if not already, I believe that they worked in Michelin starred restaurants and stuff like that. And up there, and it really was, we had dinner and it was not to be too much like the pretentious a-holes from the movie The Menu, but it really was like an artistic experience. So you look at something and go, I don't know how somebody could make that. Start eating the food and I'm like, I can't believe that this is possible. I've never had anything this good before. It's so delicious, so great. But you
Hmm.
can see the artistic craft that went into, that dish. And it's funny because we had other ones where like, this thing is really good, but this thing is like a revelation. This is crazy. So shout out to the restaurant Peche. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. It's however peach in French.
Okay.
I'll link it, but yeah, it's an amazing restaurant in a really cool small little town in Colorado. And we went up and had a great little getaway. She and I were able to reconnect. I know that I've probably been a real pain in her ass and been down and kind of depressed with the job stuff. So it was a nice opportunity for us to kind of reconnect. But yeah, it was nice to see nature. It was nice to see some artistic expression in some food. And it was just a nice little getaway. So I would say that's been my inspiration right now is
Very
places that I didn't
nice.
expect to see it from as well. So it was great. It was really good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that that wraps it up. You feeling good about wrapping this one up?
Yep. Sounds good. Yeah. Good talk.
Perfect. Yeah. So for everybody, I realize that we've probably never mentioned this, but we do have a YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, we are also available wherever you get your podcasts. So if you're listening to podcasts, feel free to check out the YouTube channel if you want to see what we look like and some of our mannerisms. And we'll have links for some of the stuff that we brought up. But please like and subscribe, leave us a comment. And this is We Should Be Working. And good chat with you guys. We'll chat soon.
Cheers.
That's stupid. I'm not doing that.